Hey everybody, welcome to the Heartland Bible Church Youth Group Bible Study. I want to ask you a question today to start off with, and here's the question. Have any of your friends ever said something to you that hurt your feelings? Well, I'll bet that's happened to you. I know it's happened to me, and if I'm being honest, I know I've said things that have hurt my friends' feelings once in a while. Sometimes I spend so much time apologizing for things I said without thinking about it that I wonder if it would be better just not to say anything at all. Well, today we're going to look at something that Jesus said to one of his best friends that probably hurt that friend's feelings very deeply. Now, that might be surprising to you. After all, Jesus is supposed to be nice, right? He would never say anything that might hurt someone's feelings. Well, Jesus certainly is kind and gentle, but he is also God's Son. That means that he will always tell the truth, and sometimes the truth doesn't feel good. It might not feel good, for example, if someone tells you that you have toilet paper stuck to your pants. It might be embarrassing to think of how many people saw you walking around with toilet paper stuck to your pants. But think how much more you'd be embarrassed if you went through the whole day and nobody ever said anything. Sometimes the truth that Jesus tells is like that. It doesn't feel good, but he never tells us the truth to be cruel. We might do that. We might tell a friend that they have a zit on their neck, but we're not saying it out of kindness so they can do something about it. We just want to put them down so that we feel better about ourselves. Jesus is never like that. When he tells us the truth, it's always for our own good, even if it doesn't feel good. Well, in today's story, Jesus' disciple and friend, Peter, had to hear a hard truth. Now, if you remember in the last study, we heard how Peter answered Jesus' question. Jesus asked, "Who do you say that I am?" Peter answered, "You are the Christ." In other words, Peter said, "You are the promised king. You are the one that God has sent to fix the world and make everything right." Well, good for Peter. This took a lot of faith. But right away, Peter's faith was put to the test, and he didn't do so well. Can you imagine having a huge math test that you didn't start studying for until about 10 minutes before it started? You wouldn't do too well. And Peter revealed that even though he got the right answer about Jesus, "You are the Christ," he hadn't really studied what that meant. So he was about to fail the test big time. In Mark chapter 8 and verse 31, right after Peter gave the right answer to Jesus' question, it says this, "And he began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things, and be rejected by the elders and the chief priests and the scribes, and be killed, and after 3 days rise again." And Jesus said this plainly, and Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. Now that's quite a picture. Here is God's Christ, his Messiah, the King sent by God to fix the whole world. And here is one of Jesus' best friends pulling him off to the side and telling him not to say such crazy things. And they did sound crazy. Jesus was telling them the truth, that the most powerful religious leaders in the land were going to reject him and kill him, and that he would come back from the dead 3 days later. As crazy as that sounds, it was the truth. That's exactly what was going to happen on the day that we remember in church every year as Good Friday and Easter. But Peter didn't want to hear this. He loved Jesus. He didn't want to see him suffer. He didn't think God's chosen king should have to go through all that, and he didn't think that Jesus should have to die. And so Peter told Jesus to just shut his mouth and stop saying these things. And that's when Jesus said this. Turning and seeing his disciples, Jesus rebuked Peter and said, "Get behind me, Satan, for you are not setting your mind on the things of God, but on the things of man." Wow. Can you imagine Jesus looking at you and saying, "Get away from me, Satan"? I don't think I would want Jesus to compare me to the most evil person in the whole universe. How would you feel if Jesus said that to you? Would you be embarrassed? Would you be sad? Would you be angry, mad at him for saying that? Well, I'm sure Peter probably felt all of these things, although the Bible doesn't say what went through his mind. But it had to be a shock to Peter to hear his dear friend and leader call him Satan. But remember what we said at the beginning of this study. Jesus will always tell the truth, even if it hurts, for our own good. You see, even though Peter knew that Jesus was the Christ, he still didn't understand something very important. He didn't understand that Jesus didn't come to rule as a king, at least not right away. Jesus came to die as a sacrifice. He was a king who planned all along to be punished and to die for the sins of other people, so that guilty people, like you, like me, like everyone, could live forever with God. Peter wasn't just standing in Jesus' way when he rebuked Jesus. He was standing in God's way, and he was standing in the way of forgiveness and salvation for everyone who would believe in Jesus. Well, this is exactly the kind of thing that Satan would do. And so Jesus told Peter a very hard truth. By opposing Jesus, Peter was opposing God. By opposing God, Peter was doing Satan's work just as if he was Satan. So what about you? What about me? Can we say in our daily life that we are being like Jesus, being obedient to God's plan, and living for his ways? Or are we making Peter's mistake? Are we actually doing the work of Satan? Do we say things that we shouldn't say? Do we watch things on TV that we shouldn't watch, that we know God doesn't like? Do we use bad language instead of letting our words be kind and gracious? Do we gossip about our friends behind their backs, saying mean things about them? Well, Jesus can forgive all of these sins, of course, for those who believe in him and in his death and his resurrection for our sins. But if we truly love him for all that he's done for us, we will not want to act like Satan. We will want to be kind and gentle and generous and patient. We will want to show love to everyone around us because we want to be like Jesus, who is also loving. So how will you choose to live this week? Will you trust in Jesus' sacrifice for your sin and choose to live for him? Or will you ignore him and live only for yourself, like Satan would do? Which path are you going to choose today?